can ask Wayne, and thank Wayne for joining us this afternoon. Wayne Blything is Food Safety Manager at Harrods, and Wayne is also qualified Environmental Health Officer and also qualified and registered Food Safety Manager, and has years of experience in providing and leading and developing training in food hygiene, food safety. So Wayne, can I please ask you to, I'm going to unmute myself and unmute yourself and share your presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you everybody, and thank you, Ina, for that lovely introduction. Just bear with me while I quickly share my screen with you all. So, where's my presentation? Here we go. Okay, so I'm hoping that everybody can see that. So my name is Wayne Blything. As Ina said, I'm a food safety advisor and food safety professional. And first, I would like to say thank you for being given the opportunity today to come along and speak to you about food safety and give you a brief overview of food safety in the UK and what your responsibilities are as food handlers. So what we're going to quickly look at in my slideshow today is we're going to start by looking at the four food safety hazards. So as food business operators or food handlers within the UK, we have a responsibility to manage and control and consider 4 food safety hazards within our workplace. And then we're going to briefly look at the 3 pillars of food safety. So I like to call them the 3 pillars to food safety. And by managing each one of these pillars within the workplace, oh, this is skipping on its own for some reason, I don't know why. By managing these food safety, 3 pillars of food safety within the workplace will ensure that you have effective controls in place to manage those food safety hazards. And then we'll finally touch on coronavirus and the coronavirus hazards within the workplace. So the 4 food safety hazards that we all have a legal responsibility to control in the workplace are either, oh, sorry guys, I'm having some technical difficulties here. Can you still see my presentation? Can you give me a thumbs up if you can?
We can see your first slide.
What, just the topics?
Yes.
Oh, right. So what I'm seeing is different. It's changing itself. So let me just stop that one. And
Wayne, I think you just need to go back into present your slideshow because we could see your whole PowerPoint window.
oh, right. Bear with me a second, please. That PowerPoint presentation has now disappeared. So you'll have to bear with me 2 seconds while I try to find it.
It's completely okay. These kind of things happen.
Food safety slides. Zoom. Share screen. Okay, so you can see this now.
Yes, the first slide, yes.
Brilliant. Okay, so the 4 food safety hazards I covered. So within the workplace, we have a responsibility to cover 4 food safety hazards, okay? Either by preventing them from contaminating our foods or by reducing them to acceptable levels if they get into our food. So the first of these hazards are chemical hazards. Chemical hazards consist of things such as cleaning chemicals, pesticides, pest-proof chemicals, or naturally occurring chemicals in foods such as poisons within uncooked kidney beans or green potatoes, or acrylamide in starchy foods such as chips that are cooked on a high temperature. The next hazard is allergens, which I'll come on to in a second. And then we move on to microbial or microbiological. So microbiological hazards are things such as viruses, mold, and yeast and bacteria. And lastly is physical. So physical hazards in the workplace are actually extremely common, but should be easily controlled with proper due care and attention. So physical hazards may be the likes of pests themselves, or broken packaging, or the likes of nuts, screws, bolts, glass, or maybe hair from your head. So with regards to allergens, 1 to 2% of adults in the UK and around 6 to 8% of children in the UK actually suffer from food allergies. And the difficulty with allergies is the fact that it only takes a small amount to cause an allergic reaction. Another thing is with allergens compared to microbial hazards, allergens aren't actually removed from food during normal cooking processes. Therefore, if an allergen is present, the only real controls you have in place is to either prevent food from becoming contaminated in the first place, or by carrying out a proper risk assessment and determining the likelihood of food being contaminated in the first place, and then giving this information to the final consumer or to the customer so that they can make an informed choice as to whether they want to purchase this food or not. Now, it's really important for you guys to be aware that in October of this year, there is new legislation coming into force in the UK in the way of Natasha's Law. Now, Natasha's Law will require you guys as food business operators to apply labels that include full allergen and ingredient lists to any products that are pre-packed for direct sale, or effectively that have been put into packaging before the customer places their order. Next, we move on to microbiological hazards. So microbiological hazards or microorganisms consist of bacteria, molds, yeasts, and viruses. Whilst physical and chemical and allergenic hazards are through contamination, microbiological hazards actually include multiplication and survival that you have to manage within the workplace. It's really important to remember that you can't see, smell or taste pathogens, so harmful viruses and bacteria. So never rely solely on your senses because there's no way of telling if a food contains harmful levels of pathogens or microorganisms. The only way you can do this is by sending food away for testing. So please don't do the chef test. I work with a lot of chefs that tell me that they've done the chef's test and they smell something or taste something and they say it's okay. We can give it another 2 days, but really that's not a scientific test. So please don't rely on your nose. It's also important to remember when trying to manage and control pathogens or microorganisms that they need 4 things to survive or multiply. And this is time, moisture, warmth, and nutrients. By removing any one of them, then it helps you to control these hazards. Now, you guys are going to be dealing with a lot of foods because you're trying to reduce food surplus and food waste. And the foods that you deal with, it's important to recognize the difference between high-risk foods and low-risk foods. Now, I've simplified this for the purposes of today's presentation into these 2 categories, but the categories are a little bit more complex than this. But what you need to know is high-risk foods basically are foods that are high in protein, so they can support microorganism growth. They are high in moisture content, and they will have a use-by date on them. Now, this use-by date is a legal requirement, and you cannot use high-risk foods past this use-by date. Whereas low-risk foods usually have preservatives added of some sort. They're low in moisture and they're low in water activity, and they have a best before date on them. And these foods, although will be past their best before date, that it's not illegal to sell them as long as they won't cause harm to the customer and they are of a standard accepted by the customer. The exception to the best before date though is eggs. So eggs shouldn't really be used after the best before date, but if they are, then pardon me, you need to ensure that they are thoroughly cooked the whole way through, because the chances of them having harmful pathogens or bacteria such as salmonella increases every day past that best before date that's being applied. So the 3 areas of food safety. So when you get inspected by your local authority environmental health officer, they're going to be looking at mainly 3 areas. And if you can manage these 3 areas, then you can manage those 4 food safety hazards effectively that we've spoken about. So the first area is hygiene practices, and then structure, and then and paperwork. So when we talk about hygiene practices, we're talking about all the necessary control measures in place to prevent cross-contamination, to ensure safe food and preparation, cooking, reheating, cooling, and storage of food should be demonstrated. So it's good hygiene practices will prevent cross-contamination. within the workplace. And when I say cross-contamination, I mean the transference of an unwanted substance, usually harmful, from product A to product B, such as microbes or allergens. So how can we prevent cross-contamination in our workplace? Well, it's really important to consider complex equipment such as meat slices or vacuum packers, and have designated equipment for both raw and cooked. Cleaning chemicals should be approved, and you should always follow the cleaning manufacturer's instructions regarding concentration and contact time. You should also use a hygienic means to clean down chemicals, so single-use cloths such as blue paper towel. You can have color-coded equipment for your foods, or separate equipment, as mentioned within that short video that we watched. Hand washing is really important. Now, the biggest cause of food poisoning, or the biggest transference of cross-contamination in the UK year on year, is through dirty hands. So regular hand washing for 20 to 30 seconds throughout the day, and you can time this, as you all are probably aware, by singing happy birthday twice. And also you could wear gloves, but don't use gloves as a replacement for good hand washing, because remember, gloves do get dirty just as hands do. Again, you need controls in place for raw meat, so again, separate boards or separate preparation areas. And also, not many people associate unwashed fruits and vegetables as high risk, but they are a high risk because they have low dose, they may be contaminated with low dose organisms such as E. coli, so it's important to wash these products effectively. And again, personal hygiene and staff clothing is important. Now, the video touched on a few temperature control requirements to protect food and ensure food safety. I'm going to touch on these also. So frozen food should be kept below -18°C, and your fridge temperature should be set to between 4 and 5 degrees C, and that will ensure that your food is maintained at a legal temperature of below 8 degrees Celsius core temperature. When cooking food, you need to ensure that you cook your foods thoroughly to a core temperature of 75 degrees Celsius for at least 30 seconds or equivalent, and that will ensure that bacteria is killed within. And then when hot holding foods, although the video said 60 degrees, it's a legal requirement here in the UK to hold your food above 63 degrees Celsius. In terms of storage, again, common sense applies. Make sure the foods are covered and labelled. Bear with me. Now, for structure, structure means that there should be no repairs required and no potential improvements should be identified, or robust procedures should be in place for ongoing repairs or recording of minor repairs. Premises and equipment should be clean and in good condition, and evidence of effective pest control and waste disposal should be in place. Now, it's a legal requirement to ensure you have a dedicated hand wash basin within your kitchen with warm running water, soap, and a single-use cloth or a hygienic means to dry your hands. Please don't use your sinks for anything else, like dirty cutlery, because you will lose marks for this. You need to have pest control procedures in place. Now, having a pest contract in place is not enough. You need to ensure that you are checking for pests yourself and making sure that your premises is pest proof. Now, remember, if you can fit a biro through a hole, a mouse can get through that hole. So really be strict on this. Looking at your actual design and layout of your premises, they should also not increase the chance of cross-contamination. Single-use sinks, if used, you need to have adequate cleaning procedures in place between use, but it's preferable to have separate sinks for both raw and cooked foods. And in terms of waste, you shouldn't allow waste to build up and accumulate in the kitchens. I would recommend foot-operated bins, and then once you take your waste outside, you should put it into closed containers again to prevent pest access. Now, bear with me while we wait for this slide to change. For some reason, it's gone back to oh, sorry. So can you see confidence in management? So confidence in management is really important and not to be neglected. So this is your food safety management procedures that you must have in place. You need to make sure that your hazards are understood, properly controlled, and managed and reviewed. Your food safety management records should be appropriate and maintained, and all staff should be suitably supervised, instructed, and or trained. Now, this food safety management system is your due diligence defense in court should you need it. If things go wrong and you need to stand in a court of law in front of a judge and defend your operations, then these records are really important to help you do that. If you do not have a proper system in place, then you're leaving yourself and your business and the customers at risk. Food safety management systems show that you've considered all the risks within your business and put those controls in place. And without an adequate system in place, if you haven't considered risks properly, then you may be risking closure to your business. Your food safety management system also needs to be based on the 7 principles of HACCP, which I recommend you go and look up after this presentation. So food safety management systems, although they can be daunting, it's important to remember that the complexity of your food safety management system will depend on the size of your operations, your customer base, and the food that you serve. For example, a food safety management system for a hospital serving several hundred vulnerable people a day will be far more complex than somebody who has a single-use cafe or single-site cafe. To get started, I would recommend you go on the Food Standard Agency's website. There is templates out there, such as the Safer Food, Better Business. There's my HACCP templates, and there's also NCAS, who you can visit their website, and they also have good templates, and they can support you to put a food safety management system in place. Or you can use the use of consultants just to get you up and running and ensure that you've considered everything properly. So in terms of COVID, the European Food Safety Authority, and a lot of people do get confused on COVID, but the European Food Safety Authority, or EFSA, have said that there is no current evidence that food is a likely source or route of transmission of the virus. But nevertheless, under health and safety law, you still have a responsibility to protect yourselves and protect your customers and anybody that you come into contact with in the workplace. So I would suggest that you go onto the Health and Safety Executive website and get one of their coronavirus risk assessment templates to identify the risks. Now, within your risk assessment, you're going to be looking at who could be harmed, potential control measures that you could put in place, such as personal protective equipment, the likes of masks and gloves. You also may want to carry out temperature checks of people coming into work to see if they're showing signs of fever before they come into the workplace. Regular cleaning should be carried out in the way of cleaning schedules. Now, I would recommend doing an hourly cleaning schedule and concentrating on hand contact surfaces throughout the kitchen. You can have increased signage around the business to encourage people to carry out proper hygiene practices and techniques, and also to instruct people on walkways and workflows to make sure you don't get congregation in tight spaces. And you also need to think about tight spaces as well, such as walk-in fridges, vehicles, or lifts. If you cannot keep a safe distance within these places, then they need to be single person spaces if controls can't be put in place. And lastly, after you've considered all your risks and you've put your risk assessment in place, you need to regularly review and update it. Now, you can do this by visiting the Health and Safety Executive website, and because the risks are ever changing, so it's up to you to review and keep on top of that and make sure that you maintain legal compliance. Please accept my apologies for my inept use of technology, and I hope that all made sense.